I'm not pulling out of my driveway. We all know what that means. It's time for another Drive to Work, Coronavirus Edition. Okay, so I've been doing fun interviews while I've been stuck at home, and I've dug into the past to find somebody that worked on Magic a while ago. So, Brian Schneider, say hello.
Hello, everybody.
Let me ask you the question I ask everybody when we start, which is, how did you get into Magic?
Yeah, I got into Magic during Revise. My friends in high school, my girlfriend actually wanted to play, and so we got some decks to play with our friends, and that's how I got into it.
Okay, and so that's back in Revise. Did you play continually up till Wizards, or did you have a stopgap or something?
I played from 1995 to 1998, and then the year before I joined Wizards, I actually had started to stop playing, and was pretty much on the brink of becoming a lapsed player, which I didn't really mention when I worked there.
So, how'd you get to Wizards? What brought you to Wizards of the Coast?
Yeah, I ended up being a prominent deck builder in the 90s, in the early days of Magic. And one of my teammates, Randy Bueller, got the job at Wizards, I think, a year or two before me. And so he went into R&D on the development side and asked me if I was interested. So it was really just fortuitous.
Okay, Randy got a lot of people in. Definitely a lot of stories. Randy got me in. Okay, so you came to Wizards. So what is the first thing you did when you came to Wizards?
I ran the Future League. I did a lot of funny things. I worked on our internal play testing organization to try and figure out how to evaluate cards. I think before I got there, a lot of things broke. Things broke while I was there. They probably still do. I was there to help try to figure out how to get the card balance part of the game right. And then I did all kinds of things. I wrote scripts for ESPN when we've had esport aspirations, and worked on Harry Potter and Star Wars and all kinds of different games.
Okay, so the first set that you led was Fifth Dawn, which interestingly, from a trivia standpoint, Aaron Forsythe had been hired at Wizards to run the website. And we brought him on Fifth Dawn as he was going to write an article about the experience, and we just gave him an opportunity to try to design stuff. And he did such a great job, we hired him into R&D. But anyway, so I led the design, you led the development.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Fifth Dawn a little bit. What do you remember about Fifth Dawn?
I remember we had this pressure. I think a lot of Muradin, I think, was about playing within like one or two colors, and then we tried to force people to, also like have this option of playing 5 colors, which I don't think everybody loved. But I think it was, still worth trying. I think there are a lot of really unique, iconic cards from that set that I remember pretty fondly. But I also if you were to name 5 cards from Fifth Dawn, I don't know that I could.
Well, I mean, one of the things, so the audience understands behind the scenes what was going on, is we made Mirrodin block. Let's just say not our finest hour of development, and it broke pretty badly. And so Mirrodin and Dark Steel, Fifth Dawn, by the time we were working on Fifth Dawn, we kind of understood that we had messed up. And so Fifth Dawn, what they said to us when in design is, all that stuff we did earlier on the block, don't do any of that stuff. And that's why we went to the 5 color thing, was we were just trying to we had to do something different because everything early in the block was breaking. And so you led the development for the least broken set in Mirrodin block.
Yeah, I think that was sort of a sea change. I think, I remember Mirrodin conversations where one person in particular was like, we're going to push artifacts really hard. This is the artifact theme. There has to be an artifact deck. We have to make sure that out of the, thousands of artifacts that are in this set, or in this block, something has to be good. And that just didn't go the right way at all. And I think you see a transition between Fifth Dawn, Kamigawa, Ravnica, and Time Spiral. We moved away from doing really powerful cards and created formats that played much better together. But it also, we took some lumps along the way.
So at some point along the way, when did you become the head developer? Do you remember?
I would say when I took over at Champions around the point where there was a handoff. Randy was supposed to lead Kamigawa. There's like a long story there where Kamigawa's design didn't come in very well.
Yeah.
And so Randy ended up like leading a month-long like sojourn into trying to improve that design, and then I took over development from him, and that's when I pretty much took over.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a little about Champions of Kamigawa. So you led the development for the main set, which really, back in the day, the main set did such a strong job of determining what the rest of the block was doing, that usually I became the head designer around that period, but I tended to do the fall sets, and you, for a period of time when you were there, I would do the fall set, and then I would lead the design, you would lead the development.
Yeah.
So, it's funny. I realized that Champions wasn't mine. Champions was done by Brian Tinsman. But the other sets we're going to talk about later today. So of the stuff you led, 3 of the things I led the design for. So anyway,
I like that.
so okay. So Champions. Let's talk about Champions a little bit before we get to.
Sure.
What do you remember of Champions of Kamigawa?
Yeah, I think it was a challenging set. I think it was tough from the design perspective. I don't think the team bought into the notion of doing a Japan-themed set. They didn't work really well together. And so you just kind of felt it from the development side that like what was going to come in wasn't going to be loved fully. And so working on the development team, like that same sentiment, I think translated, where it's really nice to work on a product like Ravnica or even with Onslaught and Mirrodin. There were things you could immediately love about it. And I think it took us a while to get to the place where we were like pretty happy with it, or at least happy with what it could be. Again, like it was kind of an unpopular theme, which didn't help. Set wise, yeah, I think eventually in the last couple of months, I think the team came to appreciate the design much more. Partly because I think we started cutting casting costs, but I think there was some missed opportunities, partly because we didn't challenge sort of prevailing opinion at the time. Like there was a logic that you couldn't make things strictly better or strictly worse than something else. So we ended up having casting costs that were just kind of inflated because there was this weird parasitic design all over the place with Spirit and Mystic and etc. And so we ended up making a set that kind of tailored to itself instead of like the whole of Magic. And it was really like fun to play in isolation, but it would have been a better one-off set and certainly a good learning experience. But I think if we had another month or two, we probably would have deviated from that a bit more. Maybe put instant and sorcery on Splice instead of putting it on whatever that mechanic was. You know,
yeah,
it just didn't fit in well.
Splice onto Arcane. The funny thing is I came to you with the idea of doing Splice on instant or sorcery, and you're like, had you just come 3 months ago, we could have talked.
I totally agree with it. Like, I wish we had done it. And afterwards, like, I've thought about, like, how do I wish we would have done these blocks better?
Yeah.
It's not that hard to figure out how to do champions better, except, like, the theme was kind of tough. I wish we had put more power level into it. You know, if you're going to put in these fun new mechanics, like, I think you need to make them sing. The split cards, the flip card, I think we could have done a better job with. We were a little bit scared of our own mistakes in Mirrodin, and, you know, that's its own mistake. We needed another month or two, and we didn't have it.
So it turns out the Champions of Kamigawa block, interestingly, was kind of the changing of the guard in some ways. So what happened was Randy had been overseeing development, even though he was the lead, he had been overseeing development. He was the director. And Bill, who was the VP, was doing design. And it was during this block that Randy finally said, fine, you be head developer. And he said to me, you be head designer. And you and I sort of took like in the middle. It didn't really happen during the block because it happened in the middle of the block. But the first block you and I sort of our reigns was Ravnica. So
that's right.
that went a little better than Champions of Kamigawa.
For sure.
So let's talk about Ravnica. So what is your memory of Ravnica? I've talked about Ravnica on my podcast infinite times, but what is your memory of Ravnica?
Yeah, I think everyone really liked the idea, which made it the energy around it was really good, and so people were very supportive of what it was trying to do. And from a development perspective, it was pretty easy, like to try to build an environment around letting people cast their gold cards in thematic ways. I think from a development perspective, we try to avoid having like anything be overly powerful. And if you look at like the constructed formats and even the limited formats of that time, they were probably the most diverse that I ever saw. And maybe it's been, beaten in the from a diversity perspective and from a gameplay perspective, I think it was kind of a special block and a special window of time. Like the sets that surrounded Ravnica ended up having very fun formats that went along with it. So it just partnered really well with everything around it.
So one of the things I know they were nervous, development was a bit nervous about when I first sort of pitched the guild model, was that the block draft was a really weird ask from you guys. Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Like, what is it like when each set has different color pairs? How did you guys figure out how to make that work?
Yeah, I remember there being a big fight about whether there needed to be 4 guilds or 5 guilds in the beginning. I think ultimately we trusted you, but I think it's because we play tested both and then just concluded that 4-3-3 was going to be more elegant.
Yeah.
It could have blown up in our faces, like with Fifth Dawn. I think it was kind of unpopular.
Yeah.
But, I think that was a case where, your instincts were right and we got out of our own way.
Do you have any, what is your favorite memory of Ravnica, just working on Ravnica?
I think my favorite memory of Ravnica, my favorite memory from that period is kind of similar from my favorite memory. We worked on a Star Wars game at some point.
Yeah. So we had a Star Wars trading card game that we did. Yeah.
Yeah, you and Richard designed it, and it's kind of a similar story where there was on the Guild Pack design team, there was a blocker preventing good ideas from getting across, and I ended up being the person to break the hold. And so in my mind, it's helping people who have good ideas, get them over the finish line. For me, that's what I remember best. It's more enabling others to do the best work. In terms of the sets, that's a long time ago.
Yeah. It was very funny that it's sort of in the beginning when you do new ideas, there's people that are kind of opposed to them, but then after they're successful, everybody loved them. History gets rewritten, and so.
Yeah, I think for me the memories of working with you and Aaron and Devin and the team on making something people really loved, I think that's what I remember. The people stick with me more than the game. Sure.
And one of the things Ravnica in some ways was really a watershed kind of set in the sense that it reshaped a lot of how we thought about things and how we made things. The fact that we've been back there twice already, it's clearly a fan favorite. So there's something about it. It's funny because one of the things that as a designer that tags at me is I always want to keep innovating. And every time we go back to Ravnica, everyone's like, "Don't change it. That's what it is." But please, can I make it something? Can I further evolve it? It's no, we love it like it is. And so it definitely is this thing we keep revisiting, and we very much revisit as it is. And one of these days, I keep wanting to revamp it a little bit. I'm like, come on, let me shake it up a little bit. So okay, speaking of shaking things up, the next block, holy moly, we shook things up. Time Spiral block. So what are your memories of Time Spiral block?
Time Spiral, it was so complicated to try and build something it was basically like building an entire block out of cube.
Yeah.
And so the way I tried to work was very intuitively and empathically. And so I'm trying to take all of this crazy information and make it make sense.
I just realized something. I didn't design Time Spiral. Brian Tinsman designed Time Spiral. I did Future Sight, but I did not do Time Spiral. So I did Fifth Dawn, I did Ravnica, but Champions and Time Spiral were Brian.
Yeah, I think with Time Spiral, it was again we were in development. It was about a month in, or it was early days, and there were developers who were like, "This isn't workable," and it was just a really hard design to work with from the start. And I think we kind of leaned in on the nostalgia and the complexity in a way that certainly in retrospect I wouldn't have done again. But that's what I think me, Devin, Aaron, probably you were drawn to at the time, and so we took a gamble there and. I wish we had put dual lands in the set, but
we definitely leaned in. I think what happened was we wanted to make a nostalgia set and just said, we had such fun making this set. It was so fun to design. It's funny because Modern Horizons is a set that we kind of revisited this idea, and I had so much fun with Modern Horizons just remembering there's something about designing and just. You can do whatever you want. You have all the tools at your disposal. That is a little intoxicating, especially when you have all the nostalgia mixed in. And but but here's my big memory of Time Spiral was we had a lot of cool concepts, but it was a little rough. Brian turned in a set that was structurally, like, there were a lot of cool ideas, but it wasn't structurally all there. And I know you spent a lot of time sort of building a lot of structure in. That's my memory of Time Spiral is you did a lot of reworking of taking a lot of Brian's cool concepts and the team's cool concepts, but giving a little more structure to it.
Yeah, I think if you played for Magic for 5 or 10 years, like, you really appreciated that set and that block.
Yeah.
And I think you can see the love that went into it, but certainly the bar was way too high for anyone who was new to the game.
It definitely taught us some stuff. But okay, so think back. So how long were you at Wizards for?
6 years.
6 years?
Yeah.
Okay. So what are other fond memories you have? Like, what's the Magic card that you're proudest of having made?
Yeah. I think on Kamigawa, I realized driving into work one morning that you could use the legend rule to make for really interesting effects. So the dragons ended up coming from me. Or I was inspiration for all the Kamigawa dragons. But it's funny, like, I remember at the time, like, designing over 100 cards, but I couldn't tell you most of them. It's funny when I'm, like, working at one of these tech companies and there's a bunch of people playing Magic. I'm like, oh, I made that. But I recognize more than I recall, if that makes sense.
Well, what was so one thing that's fun when I go back to talk to people from long ago, I talk a lot about Wizards now in my podcast and stuff, but I don't talk as much. So you were there from 99, 98?
2000 to 2006.
Oh, 2000, 2006. Okay. So what was R&D like? What is your memory of Magic R&D?
I think a lot of it was asking ridiculous theoretical questions and then talking about it half the day, right? And so there were how many IQ points would you give up for height?
Yeah,
the basketball and things like that. And so it was always this kind of, like, it's almost a humor style that I don't encounter anymore. But
I should give the actual question so the audience can. The actual question was, this was a scaff question. How many IQ for what was it? I guess for giving up
10 points for an inch.
Was it 10 points for an inch of vertical leap? I think it was
or height, or just of height.
No, it wasn't height. It was the question was how many IQ points would you give up? And I think it was for a certain amount of vertical leap in basketball. That was the original question. I think there was extrapolations of that. And Scaff. Anyway, one of the things I do a comic strip, and in my comic strip, I there's a reoccurring comic I do where people in the pit are just asking random questions, and we're wasting our day answering silly questions about, like, if you could clone one of the 7 dwarfs to fight a war, which one would it be, and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was definitely a silly and playful environment. I definitely felt like one of the more serious folks in terms of, like, trying to keep everything on the rails, but it was fun for sure.
Okay, so we talked about the stuff you led. What team? Were any teams on that were interesting? Let's see. What was the first team? You remember the first team you were on?
I worked on Odyssey, maybe.
Odyssey, okay.
I think that's a long time ago.
Do you have any memories of Odyssey? That's the set I led. The design for.
Odyssey.
Okay,
I think,
that was Randy led the development for that, I believe.
Yeah, I think I ended up breaking some cards that people probably never saw. There was a card called Detach. I think it was unsummon, but you could unsummon 2 creatures very quickly for, like, U and 1 U, and I ended up having, like, kind of absurd decks. You could do really crazy things with, like, things going to the graveyard that in development you get to, kill on turn 1 and 2 much more reasonably than you do in the real world. So I got to do a lot of card breaking. A couple things still got through, but.
So that's interesting. So one of the things, still do this today, is we like to hire people that are very good at deck building because you guys have the skill of identifying things in the file that might be problematic, and then you build decks to prove that they're problematic. Now, did you ever? One of the things I always find, not that I do a lot of that, but whenever I had a card I really liked, I always felt bad putting in decks because I didn't want it to get nerfed. So I remember.
I think that's a pretty common designer.
Yeah. I remember, though, when I was, what was it? It was for Urza's Destiny. I made a mono-white playtest deck that had 4 copies, or some number of copies of Yawgmoth's Bargain in it. And it was a replenish deck, basically. And I know way to cast them. I just was going to, I discarded them to, like, whatever the white discard gain life. There's like a cycle in that thing. But anyway, I remember I mentioned it once online that I made that, and people were mocking me for it. And I'm like, it was a brutally good deck. I don't know why everyone was mocking me for it.
Yeah, I think it was funny coming to Odyssey. It just seemed like a lot of the stuff that, a lot of stuff hadn't been caught yet. So it was a lot of fun to beat people. I think my initial record was really good, but that changed over time.
Yeah, one of the things that I think your track record, and I mean you and Randy and a bunch of people, that the early development in Magic was not our strength, and really there was a period of kind of ramping up development, of which you were a key player there. Of just right, like for example, talking about just getting things into place, like systems into place, so that you could figure out and evaluate stuff. Yeah. I think that you were the progenitor, and then Eric Lauer did a lot after you. But nowadays they have all of these tools and all of these things that they do. About, one of my quotes I say a lot is that I feel like the early part of Magic is very art and the later part of Magic is very science. I'm making whatever I want to make, but later on it's like you have to make sure everything works and put it through the system, and there's a lot of calibration that goes on.
Yeah, I think in terms of creation, the world has changed everywhere in that regard.
Is there any? So we have a little bit of time here. So I'm curious, what Magic memories? What you have a good Magic memory? Something your time at Wizards, 6 years?
Yeah, there were a series of pranks. I didn't prank you, but there were a series of pranks that happened in the early.
Wait, did you do them? Did you do the pranks?
I may or may not have pulled the pranks.
But you didn't. Did you do my prank?
I didn't. I don't know. I think I have an idea of who did your prank, but like the one related to goldfish and farming, I'm familiar with. But the one where the eggs that like cracked and we all had to smell it for weeks. Not vetted by development.
So real quickly for the audience who might not know the story. So in R&D for a while, there was a prank. Turns out, I think there's not one prankster. I think it was a series of pranksters because numerous people have now over the years said, "Oh, I did some of it." So I think it was multiple people. But Mike Donate has
Mike did yours, I think.
Yeah, what?
Mike did the egg.
So anyway, one day I'm about to leave town, I think, and I'm stopping the office to grab something, and my desk is every inch of my desk is covered with eggs. My desk, my chair, just eggs. My shelves, everything's covered with eggs. And then there's a live bird in a bird cage on the eggs. And the funny thing was, I had to leave to go on vacation, so I couldn't even clean it up. So I'm like, I took a picture with it, and then I had to go. And then other people cleaned it up. And then they had put eggs in this card box that no one realized when they cleaned up that there were eggs in the card box. And then months later, there was a smell that we were trying to figure out where the smell was coming from. And it was that egg box, so. So which pranks did you do?
I was tied to the farm. The first one was Henry's farm.
Oh, right. There's bales of hay and right at Henry's desk. The trick was they would pick somebody's desk and they would do stuff, right? So.
Yeah, I think Andy Collins. We essentially built an aquarium in cups and put them all over his desk, and he had, I think, like 100 goldfish to deal with. But the eggs, the
eggs wasn't you, so. Yeah, it's funny. I've referenced this. I say we refer to it as the Mad Farmer because it started with the farm, and so. But that was a mystery for a long time. Now, see, you listen to my podcast, you learn who
still half a mystery.
Who was the Mad Farmer? Well, part of it was Brian.
That is correct.
Yeah, one of the things that's a fun thing to talk about. The after hour, the sort of one of the things that I like about R&D is it's a group of gamers, and so there's a lot of gaming that goes on. And it's even to today, although I miss a lot of it because I go home with my family, but there's a lot of after-hours gaming that goes on at Wizard. Well, back when we could actually go to the office.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
What else? I'm just trying to get people a sense of, I guess this is sort of 2006 Wizards.
During my time, there was an active basketball game. A lot of people from the company would go and play basketball every day. I think one thing I liked about Wizards is it was very inclusive. So like the whole team would like say, "Hey, we're doing lunch today," and there'd be different groups that would go off and either play games or have like funny conversations about just a very creative vibe. But it was very open and not very exclusive or niche-y, or everyone was just there to have fun, and that's rare. I think that's actually really special.
So, I'm trying to think, but I'm almost to work. Is there any final sort of thoughts on your time on Magic or on Wizards in general?
It's funny. I definitely liked working in that medium a lot. Having worked in tech for the last decade, I think Magic's a really special medium to design for. You can essentially just like change a couple of knobs, write in some words, and you have like an entirely new object that you can like understand really quickly. Mm-hmm. So the pace of being able to make a game or work in a game where like you can feel it really fast, I think that was pretty unique. And there aren't that many formats where that's true. Maybe technology will improve and we'll be able to make experiences that you can like make as an empath more quickly. Mm-hmm. But as an intuitive person, like Magic was like bar none in terms of mediums that were fun to work with in a very human way. It's just not the way technology works at this point. So I do miss that.
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned, which is really interesting to me, is whenever you go to tech companies, that there's always people that play Magic there.
Yeah,
there's some correlation between the desire to create something and the love of Magic. That I find there's a high correlation between that. It's true for game. Like whenever I go to like GDC or something, every game design studio has a Magic League. It's just a thing that
every tech company has a Magic League.
Yeah,
it's just there's something about like how the engineering mind works and how Magic works. Like there's a real symbiosis there.
So so I'm gonna wrap up now because I'm at my desk. Any last thoughts? Any final things you? Looking back on Magic in your past?
Yeah, I think for me it's like, where is Magic going to fit in? I haven't played a lot since I left. But I have 2 kids and nephews, and so there'll be a point where like I probably re-enter on their behalf, and so.
The next generation will pull you back.
Yeah, so it probably 5 years from now, maybe I'll send you an email about what did you do here. But I guess there's some kind of like, in my mind, there's a horizon where I'll probably see what you've been up to.
Okay, well, I'm excited to find out. Let me know once you do. So anyway, I'm now at my desk. So we all know what that means. It means it's the end of my drive to work. So instead of talking about Magic, it's time for me to be making Magic. So thank you, Brian, for joining us.
All right, thanks, everybody. Thanks, Mark.
Okay, I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.